Good day and welcome to this brand new episode of Focus On Zanele Morrison. Beauty is often said to be subjective, but the L'Oreal Foundation is standing firm on their encouragement and support for women in the scientific and medical field. L'Oreal is synonymous for their status as one of the leaders of the beauty industry with a net worth of $229.46 billion. They are dominating the beauty market, but they are also giving back to women across the globe by moving beyond the physical and embracing the intellectual. This is where the L'Oreal Foundation supports and empowers women to shape their future and make a difference through scientific research, inclusive beauty, and climate action. To break down the objectives of the foundation, we are joined by Alexandra Palt, the CEO of the L'Oreal Foundation. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to begin with L'Oreal's core values and commitments, which include scientific research, inclusive beauty, and climate action. Why are these commitments especially important to bring awareness and to ensure that there's adequate funding for them?
Yeah, so the L'Oreal Foundation is for a very long time engaged and committed to support women scientists around the world. So this commitment comes from our very long experience in the scientific field. We have a lot of researchers and research happening at L'Oreal, and we became aware 25 years ago that women researchers are not as visible, they are not as recognized as their male counterparts. So 25 years ago, we decided to make for women in science, together with our partner UNESCO, the cause that L'Oreal Foundation wants to defend, because the world needs science and science needs women. We need women in science because we need their expertise, their competence, their intelligence, their talent to face the world's challenges.
And how do you define inclusive beauty and link that to what you've just told around the need for there to have women in the scientific field? Is that where inclusive beauty begins, and where does it go beyond?
Now, inclusive beauty is, so when you have a foundation, of course, we have our big program about women scientists, but we also want to contribute in other ways to society. So another way to contribute to society is about inclusive beauty, where we make beauty accessible for people who are in difficult social condition, who are in a difficult health condition, that beauty gives self-confidence, encourage you to go on in difficult life situations. So well-being treatments can have a very positive effect on people who are in a difficult life situation, but also access to beauty professional trainings, meaning become beauty professional, can help people get out of poverty. And so this is another stream of our work. And the third one is on women and climate.
You've really chosen critical issues for this decade, even though you started over 25 years ago. You're also including climate change and digital inclusivity. Whilst they're both trending, how is L'Oreal and UNESCO also responding to this challenge?
So the For Women in Science Award, what we see with the For Women in Science Award is, so our aim is to make women scientists and their achievements visible to society, because we think that women with their expertise, intelligent life experience have also to contribute to shape the world. And what we see more and more in our awards is that women scientists get interested into environmental science, because especially on the African continent, the challenges that are faced, women scientists would want and wish to contribute to solve these. So in our awards, what we see is that our young talents, so these are doctorants or postdocs, they are very, very committed to bring solutions. And these solutions, of course, concern very often climate change, because it becomes a huge issue. Let's not forget that 35 of the 50th most vulnerable countries to climate change are on the continent. So women scientists know that, feel that, and want to bring solutions and research to that. And then, of course, you have also the issue of artificial intelligence, tech, all digital related issues where research is needed to use technology for the best and for the benefit of the countries our young researchers come from.
And interestingly enough, 4 Nobel Prize winners were nominated after being distinguished by the L'Oreal UNESCO Awards for Women in Science. What does this indicate about the level of female excellence that this awards showcases, and especially about the women that have been chosen and nominated?
So yeah, I'm very proud to say that with the last prizes, it's 7 Nobel Prizes that have received before the For Women in Science Award. So I do, of course, the whole merit is to the women scientists, but I think what it tells about the award is that we have really great scientific juries who choose and select the most talented and women in science for our award, and that our award contributes to bring opportunities and visibilities to women. Let's not forget that for the moment, there is not even 4% of women having received the STEM Nobel Prize. So there is an issue about visibility, making the women who are excellent scientists known. And it is true that also when we ask our alumni, they all say that the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Award has brought that to them. Opportunities, visibilities, confidence in themselves, role modeling for the next generation, and that is really the aim that we pursue.
And now the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women Science Initiative, it began about 25 years ago, and the Sub-Saharan environment, or the Sub-Saharan regional program, saw success since its inception in 2010. What are some of the reasoning behind expanding this program further into specifically South Africa?
Yeah, so we have for a long time a Sub-Saharan African program, but we have made it 2 programs. One for South Africa, because in South Africa there is a strong support to science, to women scientists with excellent research facilities and institutions. And for the other Sub-Saharan African countries, we want women scientists to be able to compete among women coming from countries where they face the same level of difficulties. Because unfortunately today, investment in science is too low. Investments in institutions, in research facilities, in opportunities. So for a lot of women from Sub-Saharan Africa, being a scientist is really a fight, and there are hundreds of obstacles and difficulties to overcome in order to be able to contribute. And so we have now 30 young talents from Sub-Saharan Africa and additional 5 from South Africa who are competing among them.
And it's a huge challenge because it begins right up to the schooling system and right up to the choices that women ultimately, make, and access to so much for those who are not privileged. So what are the long-term goals then for the L'Oreal Foundation in terms of achieving this gender equality and inclusivity in these science fields? What do you wish for yourselves to achieve?
Yeah, so I think it is very important to say that it is not just about equality. It is, of course, an issue of gender equality and best opportunities for everybody, but it is also a very huge issue for the society in which we live. We need all the talents. We need science that reflects also the perspective and needs of women, because that will allow us to create the most resilient, the most efficient societies and economies. So it is really, really important that more and more women come into science and take leadership positions, because unfortunately, very often women are not in leadership positions, even if they make the whole way to PhD, postdoc, professor. When you look at the numbers, it is very clear that only 15% of leadership positions in Europe are occupied by women in research. It is all around the world the same. We have to bring women into science, but we also have to break the glass ceiling. And that is really important. So that is our long-term goal, bringing more women into science, but allow them to thrive, to succeed, and to be visible.
The numbers definitely are they cause one to realize how big the challenge is. And as we go along, we need to measure the impact of these initiatives and programs. How are you going to go about doing that? How are you going to go about showing the progress year on year of inclusivity in the science fields?
So yes, of course, there are numbers. UNESCO is also collecting every year numbers in order to be able to do the World Science Report. We evaluate here regularly with our alumni, so meaning with our award winners and young talents, the impact of the program, of what it helps them to achieve, how they progress, what we can bring in additional support to them. So we are measuring the impact that we are having on the women scientists. And it is true, last year we had our 25 years of women in science, and they confirmed that this award for 90% of them allowed them, encouraged them to stay in science, to make careers in science, to be visible, to have opportunities. So we want to have impact on women scientists, and they confirm us that we do have.
And most important, I think it is to measure the impact on those that you have, within your reach. But it's going to take a whole lot of organizations and stakeholders to make this happen. How are you going to pull everybody together? How do you galvanize organizations, institutions, and government to help to increase the impact of women in the science fields?
So I think that governments more and more understand that this is in the country's, in society's interest, that the best societies, the best economies, the best working democracies have women in leadership positions. So I think that it is a movement. My apologies. It is a movement that is, there is a lot of awareness that this is benefiting everybody. The issue is, especially in African countries, that the investment and the part of the GDP that is going to research facilities, support to research, is definitely too small. The challenges that we are all facing are enormous. So we need research to respond to them. And I hope that there is going to be more and more investment in science, in women and men scientists, because let's not forget, African scientists represent only 2.7% of scientists in the world. And Africans represent 17% of the world's population.
But I think you've said something critical for me, is that everybody now realizes that this is important and this is critical. And I think on the back of that realization, there's hope we'll achieve progress much faster over the next couple of decades. But I want to say thank you so much to my guest, Alexandra Palt, CEO of the L'Oreal Foundation. According to the UNESCO Science Report, women have achieved parity of 45 to 55% at bachelor's and master's levels of study, and are on the cusp of achieving parity at PhD level with a representation of 44%. These are promising figures. However, women remain a minority in fields such as digital transformation technology, computing, physics, mathematics, and engineering, which are driving the fourth industrial revolution and future job opportunities. L'Oreal has made significant contributions to bridging the gender gap in girls studying STEM subjects and women in scientific fields. The L'Oreal UNESCO program for women in science has been instrumental in raising the profile of exceptional women researchers through annual prizes and research fellowships. To share her story on how the program has assisted her and to give insight into groundbreaking research, honoree of the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Young Talent Awards, Ntabeleng Tlapisi, joins us. Well, Ntabeling, could you share the story of how your interest in science was sparked and how it led to where you are today as an honoree of the 2023 edition of the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Talent Awards?
Okay. Thank you so much for asking me the question. Well, I've always been a very curious child from a very young age. So I've always loved reading books and reading about discoveries around the world. But particularly when I was in my high school, a friend of mine's mom passed on because of HIV. So in those days, nobody knew what HIV is or what AIDS is. And I knew there are doctors around and who will help people. But my spark was rekindled by the fact that I wanted to be one of the people who would have synthesized or designed drugs that will cure such diseases that nobody knew about. So that is why when I did my master's and my PhD, I went into medicinal chemistry.
Now, your research involves combining photodynamic therapy and photothermal therapy for cancer treatment. Could you explain in simple terms how these therapies work and the potential impact they can have on cancer treatment?
Okay. Photothermal and photodynamic therapy, these are two non-invasive cancer treatments of which can be used as an alternative to chemotherapy or surgery. As we know, for chemotherapy, for example, or surgery, people, when they are treated with chemotherapy or surgery, some parts of their body are also affected, and this is irreversible. Some people's hands are cut, or for breast cancer, people's breasts are cut. So, photothermal and photodynamic therapy are therapies that come as an alternative. In this sense, in photodynamic therapy, we normally use dyes. So these dyes are used in the presence of oxygen and light, and then they are very specific and will travel through are injected into a person's body, and in this presence of oxygen and light, they will produce toxic oxygen, which will only kill the tumor cell or the cancer cell. While in photothermal therapy, nanoparticles are used, and these nanoparticles will also be used in the presence of light of a specific wavelength. And then this light, these nanoparticles in the presence of light will produce heat, which will in turn kill the cancer cells. So these two methods are very good because they are non-invasive and also are specific because they kill only the cancer cells, unlike chemotherapy, which can kill also the normal cells.
You mentioned also using plant-mediated synthesized nanoparticles in your research. How do these nanoparticles play a role in your innovative approach towards this cancer treatment? I mean, what makes it unique in the field of medicine?
As we know, in Africa, our parents or our forefathers have been using plants, which now is called indigenous knowledge or indigenous plants. So in my research, I intend on using those plants, which are called the traditional plants or the indigenous knowledge plants. And then I use them to synthesize or combine them with the nanoparticles so that they as well play a role in the drug that I'm synthesizing. So, for example, I'll do plant mediated synthesis of my nanoparticles, maybe gold or iron oxide nanoparticles, to then do photothermal therapy. So I'll be in a way preserving the knowledge of our forefathers, also documenting it, because we have a challenge of that our medicinal plants or traditional plants are not well documented. So me using these plants is unique because I'm using science, but also preserving the knowledge that has been passed on from our forefathers or our grandfathers as well.
And perhaps you could also help describe a specific example or a case where your innovative phototherapies have shown promise in treating cancer?
Well, the photodynamic and photothermal therapy, unfortunately, in Africa have not been used until clinical trials, or they have not been used already in animals or people. However, they're still being researched. In the UK and the US, however, these treatments are already being put out in clinical trials or even in people. For example, in the UK, a photodynamic drug is already being rolled out for skin cancer. So I've seen it work because it kills at least 86.7% of the skin cancer cells. So I believe they really work. Just that in Africa, we still have to implement them to go to clinical trials, and then they can be used in our bodies after the clinical trials have passed.
So what I'd really love to know as well is, as a woman in science, what does this recognition in the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Young Talent Awards mean to you personally? How do you envision it influencing your journey and the stories you're going to tell about your role in the field of science?
This winning this award has been a very great honor, especially after finding out that in my country, I'm the first person to win. So to me, it's not just an honor to myself, but for people coming after me. It has really brought me joy and happiness, but also for me to say, I'm not doing it for myself. I have to help other people in their journeys in science to win this award and get recognition as well for the work that they're doing. So for me, it has opened not just doors, it will not only open doors for myself, but for people coming after me to say, okay, Ntabeleng, you have won this. What are you doing about the award? How are you helping other women in science coming after you, or just people around you, to help them also get this award or recognition, also to help them in their careers and to build collaborations with people across the world.
You also mentioned your commitment to supporting and mentoring other young people who are coming up in science careers. Have you been involved in mentoring before? What is the advice that you would give to aspiring scientists, especially women who are looking to make their mark in the field?
I have been mentoring young high school students who want to go to universities for different fields. First, I always encourage people to follow their passion, no matter what other people say, because I believe women are very resilient and they're strong and also hard workers. So I've been involved in many mentorship or mentee programs at home and even in school where I school. So the advice I would give to people who come after me or women that want to do science is that just follow your dreams. That's number one. Also find a mentor, find somebody who can support you, and don't be afraid to not know. That's the advice I would give people.
Let me touch on something else that you mentioned, your dream of harnessing sustainable methods and plant-based or plant-mediated medicines for affordable and accessible disease cures in Africa. This is so interesting. Share more with me. What is your vision? How are you going to work towards this?
Well, as I've said that my vision is to use sustainable methods, and I've started doing that by using the plants that we already have in our different countries. For example, because I'm from Lesotho, I use plants that are from Lesotho to synthesize the nanoparticles that I use for photodynamic therapy. In the long run, though, I would like to maybe collaborate with other researchers to open a research institute in Lesotho where we can also use sustainable methods and not have to rely on buying very uneconomical and very expensive chemicals, but we can use the plants that we already have, which have phytochemicals that can be able to treat cancer or other diseases that we encounter in Africa.
And in the pursuit of your research, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced? How have you overcome them? How do you keep going and reach the level of success you have today and hopefully you continue to have?
My biggest challenge so far has been finding a mentor. I think since I started my postgraduate years, that has been a struggle. And I think this is so because there's very few women who one can look up to and say, there are very few women in science. So there's very few women who one can look up to and say, I want this person to be my mentor. So that is my challenge. But recently, or in the past few years, I've been trying to reach out, even outside my horizon, overseas, and sending emails to people for them to mentor me, because I believe in science, you cannot do it alone. In anything, you cannot do it alone. You need somebody who has come before you, who has more experience and more experience and knowledge of what you are doing. So that has been my biggest challenge, is to find the right mentor for what I'm doing.
Could you elaborate some more, I think, on the goals specifically that you have for your future in research? How is it going to contribute in your mind to healthcare, not only in Lesotho, but across Africa?
For one, I would wish that in my research, the first thing is I wish and hope to make a product out of the drugs that I'm doing, patent it, and then can be able to commercialize it. And secondly, I would love to, as I said, to maybe open a research institute for cancer in Lesotho, because as we know, Lesotho is a landlocked country which relies most on in South Africa. So I would wish for me to open, or me and other collaborators to open, a research institute where it will be a multidisciplinary research institute where people would come with different research and we collaborate for different diseases. So that is my long-term goal, that one day I'll be able to be one of the people who have opened that research institute for health and other climate change and other disciplines, but it will be for science.
And before I let you go, I want to ask you to share a memorable moment from your scientific journey that has really had a significant impact on your outlook and perhaps your determination to make a difference in the world of medicine and science.
I think I always admire when people come up with these drugs and then they say that clinical trials have passed. But particularly a few years ago, I went to Tanzania in a conference, an African conference, African material conference. And there I met a guy from Tanzania who spoke about him doing research not for the world, but for his country. I was very inspired because I felt the need. It made me want to not only work for research and papers, but work for the people at home, for my community. Because as he said, we are educated by the community and hence have to bring back to the community. So that has always been my inspiration. After I met that gentleman, that I didn't go to school for myself, for my accolades. I don't have a PhD for my accolades, but I do it for my country and for the people in my country. So that has changed my life. And that's why I say, even my drugs that I synthesize in the lab, it's not for me or my accolades, but I do it for the community, to better Lesotho, to better Southern Africa, and to better the world.
And on that note, we can conclude this inspiring conversation. Thank you to my guest, Nthabeleng Hlapisi, doctorate student for Inorganic and Materials Group at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and the honoree of the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Young Talent Awards. Thank you so much to you for watching. Until next time, from me, Zanele Morrison. Goodbye.